Weaver or Mrs. Smith, but we do have quorum, right? Okay, so we're ready to get started on, is that a thumbs up or a, okay. I wasn't sure you get thumbs up or a countdown. All right, we'll call the meeting to order, the regular meetings. Please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of silence.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, so 1.03, may I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
Move to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Leonards. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion on the agenda? Items to be added, whatever? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor of approving the agenda as presented, say aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Agenda is passed. 2.01, may I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Move to approve.
Thank you. In a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any corrections, adjustments, et cetera, to the minutes? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor of approving the minutes as presented, say aye.
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 Opposed, say
Oh,
nay.
for sure, I'll abstain.
Okay. One abstention. Opposed, say nay. All right, minutes are passed. 3.01, President's Report. I have three things quickly. One you see on the agenda tonight. Let's see, 8.03, we'll have Mr. Redding as an acting superintendent, or will be put in. This is because per Pennsylvania code, Mr. Woodman is limited to being in the acting position role by 12 months, which would expire then June 30. Mr. Redding, who is with us tonight, is available, has had quite a bit of experience, and will be covering the gap between July 1st and when we get the next superintendent in, which ties to the second item. Mr. Tom Templeton has reported that the posting is up, both around the state and nationally, as well as on our website. Applications are due June 23rd, which we thought seems a little long, but in reality, right now, any applicants are going to be focusing getting school finished, graduation, all of those things, and then have a little bit of a breather. So that's why we went settled on June 23rd as the time frame. And last item that I have is a reminder, next Tuesday is the election. And so an early thank you for all of those that are, not all of the 9, I think it's 5 of the regions that we have are up for election for the primaries. And I thank all of the candidates that have stepped forward, all the individuals that volunteered and say, I'm willing to step up and fulfill that civic duty. Many of the elections have multiple people on it, which is fabulous that we get additional just options, so to speak. So it's really nice, and express, again, appreciation for everybody that has stepped forward to take that. 3.02, Mr. Woodman.
Yes, for the superintendent's report, just a bunch of important dates. Is also in your Friday folder, but I want to point them out. This May 10th, Cassius Library, this is College Information Night. May 15th, here in the auditorium at 6 p.m. is National Honor Society. Of course, you all are invited. May 22nd is Night of the Stars here in the Cassius Auditorium. That's at 7. Baccalaureate is May 25th at King Street Church at 6:30. Franklin Learning Center graduation is May 30th at 6 p.m. And then, of course, we have CMS graduation on Thursday, June 1st at 6:30 p.m. in the stadium, in the auditorium if it's inclement weather. And June 2nd is Cassius Stadium at 6:30. If there's inclement weather, then they will try to go to the next day. But those are important dates coming up to get on your calendars. Thank you.
I think also the Night of the Stars, the 22nd, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Good. That was more of a reminder for me than, but it's also for everybody.
Yeah.
All right. Any questions for Mr. Woodman? Okay, 4.01, members of the audience are invited to comment on agenda items. Remember, 3 minutes, et cetera. No need to state your address. There's obviously probably another sheet in the back, but what I have right now is, start with Mrs. Jordan. You're commenting on 602 and 518.
This is the work I did, okay, which relates to what I'm going to say tonight. This is my checkbook, which also relates to what I'm going to say tonight, and I hope you give me a little more leverage than 3 minutes. On the evening of May 14th, I left 3 voicemails to Mark Scher, Faye Gogler, and Sherry Diller concerning the new playground equipment at Stevens Elementary School after listening to their comments surrounding the needed playground equipment for Stevens Elementary School. Faye Gogler suggested that organizations and taxpayers donate to the cause. In my voicemail to her, I told her my husband and I did just that. In fact, we donated more than what my husband and I paid in school tax increases for school year 2022 and 2023. $32.34 more in taxes from the previous year. Because of our assessed value on our house, which is in Penn National, I can guarantee you that that's more than some of you paid in school tax increases to our school district. I could also check the county records on your property assessments to verify what I'm telling you here. I'm also not above shaming adults into doing what's right for the children regardless of race, religion, or creed. So I went back into the bill list from December until now. Since December, you all approved $2.35 million to cyber charter schools, or $1.35 in the current year's budget. You approved almost $113,798 in legal fees, or $0.065 in this year's budget. You even approved $89,847 in architect fees, or 0.5% in this year's budget. You aren't finished with approving these expenditures either. The playground equipment is $81,192, or 0.046% in this current year's budget. So really, what is your reluctance here in spending this 0.046% in this current year's budget? Do I dare say your reluctance is rooted in prejudice? It appears that way to me. The local real estate taxes collected in year 2011 to 2012 were $49.9 million. The local real estate taxes collected in school year 2022-2023 were $75 million, almost $76 million. Translation, this school district has grown in leaps and bounds since school year 2011-2012. With that increase came diversity. You are forced to accept diversity now through home sales. Of those board members who are now reluctant to act on this .46 expense, you never bothered to ask Ms. Lynch how much time she put into working on this grant application either. Grant applications are very time intensive due to the many requirements that come along with them. According to Google, it takes 6 to 8 weeks to write a grant. Ms. Lynch pulled this work together in record time. She deserves praise from you, not a reluctance to fund 0.046%.
Okay.
Please consider what I said to you all tonight. Vote yes to 0.046%. One other thing,
Okay,
and
please-
then I'm
please-
done.
please wrap
I'm
up.
done. I want you, when it comes time to vote on YouTube, to vote for it. Any potential candidate needs that. I looked, before I came to this meeting, there were 317 views. That's from teachers. That's from people like me that go back and look at what I've said. Now, I almost wanted to cry here tonight, and I did during the day, because I thought about this. I wanted to emotionally break down tonight. So I want you people to have a come to Jesus moment. I don't want to hear any more about you didn't have a picnic table back when you were a kid. My husband has stated to you,
Mrs. Jordan, you've already gone over a minute and a half.
I know,
Then
my husband has stated
finish.
to you, stay in the present, don't go back into the past. We're in the present day. Please finally listen. Please. It's for today's children,
Mrs.
not
Jordan.
yesterday.
Mrs. Jordan, you know that you have 3 minutes. Please, please, please practice ahead of time to keep it to the 3 minutes. Thank you. Next up is Mr. Dalloway.
All right, thank you, Mr. President, members of the school board, staff. This item was discussed last meeting, so I don't want to take as much time as I did last time, but there are a couple things I'd like to re-comment on. And one is, there was a suggestion that with playgrounds, an inventory should be taken of all the playgrounds in the school system. I think that's a very valid idea, because we know that some are newer and some are older. And as you take an inventory, and when you build schools, oftentimes there's new equipment installed. So the older schools have older equipment. But when you take an inventory, you set down the date that it was installed. You keep a record of when it was inspected. You keep a record as to when repairs were made. And at some point, you're aware of the fact that when you install things, such as roofs and whatever, there's a lifespan for this. And because you want to best utilize the taxes, you try to expand that by good maintenance. But if you look at the playground equipment at Stevens, probably now being one of the older elementary schools, the play equipment is very old and is definitely in need of replacement. And when it gets to that point, it also becomes a liability. So again, the other thing I'd like to speak about is there was a comment about if you approve this, you'll be setting a precedent. Well, I'd venture to say that school boards, when they fund activities, capital improvements at schools, you don't think about setting precedents, because if you did, I think all the schools would have all of the same benefits for all of the students. And you know as well as I do, as you build schools, regulations change. You have to provide new and existing functions in that school, but you don't oftentimes upgrade the old schools to meet some of those functions in the newer schools. But if you are thinking of setting a precedence, what I'm hearing or seeing is a concept that if a playground needs improvement and there is money raised to help in that improvement, then the school board would step up and provide the additional money. So really what you're doing is helping those who are trying to help themselves. And I think that's a good type of precedent to establish. So again, I would hope that you would vote in favor of this in supporting the new equipment at Stevens, show that you are in support of the students and the fact that they have not had their playground equipment updated in a very long time. It is definitely for your benefit and their benefit to do so. So again, thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, next, if I'm reading the handwriting correctly, Mr. Frames? Thank you. Apologies. Mr. Frame. I understand. Tina.
It's not on.
Better?
Yes, sir.
We'll try again.
Hold a little
Thank you
closer,
for
yep.
permitting me to speak to you on behalf of Thaddeus Stevens Playground. My name is Frank Frame, and I have a passion for children and playgrounds. I reside in Region 5, Ward 1, and I have done so for the past 25 years. This is my first time addressing the school board. How did I acquire a passion and interest for children and playgrounds, you ask? You see, my wife, she's with me tonight, and I retired as educators, so to some degree, interest in children and playgrounds comes naturally. Loretta is a retired health and physical education teacher and has long retained an affinity for play, both structured and unstructured or free. She studied the topic and produced several graduate papers on the topic. Her interest led her in the mid-'80s, 1980s that is, not 80 years of age, upon our move to Scotland School campus to immediately censor the playground equipment in place and to politely insist that I remove and replace it all and learn the codes. Can you just turn the page? Much of the old, unsafe, and ineffective PlayStations were removed. Subsequently, in 1990, on our academic sabbatical, she chose to focus on school playgrounds to report on as we traveled through the 48 contiguous states. I believe I have made the point that I have some knowledge concerning playgrounds. At this point, I will revert to KISS principle and keep it simple, stupid. Playgrounds are particularly important for elementary students. This is supported by research. One doctoral dissertation at the University of Tennessee provided data showing that properly equipped playgrounds accompanied by properly scheduled recess, 1, help to improve cognitive test scores, 2, provide relaxation and regrouping for students so they better process what they have learned, 3, provide opportunity to develop socially and emotionally with and without structure. Last but not least is the improvement of a student's health. I've failed to address the positives of the improved school climate and improved school discipline, which have been proven as well. Thus, I'll cut to the chase and be frank. I see only 2 basic options for you, but I'm sure there are others. Option 1, refuse to fund using the precedent excuse, thus preventing any good things from happening and sending the message that we are more concerned with possible rainy days than providing current needs for students. Or option 2, you may decide as a concerned student carrying board that you will support the project and work with the grant and Stevens support people to support the school and its members to improve and expend the required funds to make it happen. Saying we are reaching out to give you a hand up, not a handout. You have amassed a substantial amount of cash assistance to help complete the project. And we applaud your efforts, as well as those of your supporters. Thaddeus Stevens is a good school, and we hope to make it even better. My thanks and admiration go out to each board member for their dedication to public education. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I got another sheet. Let's see. Mr. Shoup?
All right. Good evening, school board and administrators. My name is Curtis Schaup, a parent, community member, and a building sub in the CASD school district. Some of you, or first of all, I would like to express my appreciation for all the hard work the teachers have done this year for my kids and the many of thousands of kids in this school district. Also, for the businesses and restaurants, churches, and community members for the donations of food, desserts, and other well wishes for teachers this week. It is very much appreciated. It doesn't go unnoticed. Now at the issues at hand, I'm here to talk on the agenda item 6.02, the Stevens Playground Grant. As a member of the Stevens PTO, the athletic director, and building substitute at Stevens, I spent most of my time there. The most recent committee of the whole meeting, it was discussed that we would stop running to daddy when we needed funding for things. I am appalled that any board member would suggest that we are running to daddy for funds. This is not running to daddy. It is an abuse of power and a neglect of responsibilities towards your and our students. Stevens is your building. It's our building. We all must take responsibility for what happens within our building. Stevens is on the verge of a much-needed renovation this summer, and as you decide on the playground, just remember, Stevens is not like other schools in this district. You were given numbers on the population percentages at Stevens, so just a quick reminder, 86% of the students at Stevens are economically disadvantaged. 10% were Black or African American, 70% are Hispanic, 11% are white, 8% two or more races. Chambersburg Borough, just looked up the census for that from the latest 2021 census, and 72% is white, 11% is Black or African American, and 22% is Hispanic. So I urge you to view this as an equity situation, not an equality. Stevens is put at a far greater disadvantage at the starting line. As a PTO, we suggested certain playground equipment, and the board replied by suggesting that they know better. Please avoid micromanaging and listening to those closest to the situation. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Coons, also on 602.
Hello? Okay. Good evening. I'm not going to be before you long. I'm here to talk about the Stevens Playground as well. I just had a couple questions, and I know you guys are going to discuss this later. So if this could be part of your discussion, if not, I mean, I guess it's your purview, but I just wanted to raise them up. I wasn't quite sure why it's not the district's responsibility to upgrade or maintain the playground equipment since it's on student grounds. So if you can make that clear to me, it just seems to me that since it's on student grounds, it would be the school district's responsibility to upkeep it, such as my own play set on my own grounds. It's my responsibility and my husband's responsibility to upkeep it. So I was just wondering about that. I know that there's been a lot of talk about precedent, and there is something to be said about precedent, but I think there's also something to be said about when precedent is not working. So shouldn't that mean that if it's not working, shouldn't it change? Because just because it's always been precedent doesn't mean it should always remain so. It was mentioned that we don't always have to run to daddy to pay for things all the time. But maybe another way of looking at it is how can we as a community, school board, PTA, organizations, members of the community, come together to help a part of a community that needs it. Like, that's part of being a community. And I think for Stevens' credit, they're not asking for the whole amount. A grant has been potentially provided for them. So I think that might be something to also consider. Full disclosure, my kids do not attend Stevens. They actually attend Scotland. And I was asking them, like, well, how many playgrounds do you have? And they're like, well, we have 2. One for the rest of the kids and another one for, I believe, younger kids, kindergarten age or something like that. And I'm like, wow, I wish Stevens could have like one that met their needs the way that they need it as well. I mean, just looking at the pictures, it looks pretty dilapidated. They need it. I mean, I'm fortunate that my kids' playgrounds are good, as far as I know anyway. And I want to see that, not just at Stevens, at all of the schools in our community, because again, as a community, we're all supposed to care about all of it, not just one piece of it. And I think also too, that investing, it's another way of investing in kids. I mean, we send our kids, as a parent, we send our kids to school for wonderful education, for a better life, because they are the next generation. We send our kids to school because we want them to be safe, inside the building and outside the building. So I just encourage you guys to please just support Stevens in this way and just let them know, not only the kids, but the staff and the parents, that you're investing in them. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I think that's, look one more time. Okay, that's what I have for those that make, for public comment on agenda items. Section 5, consent agenda. I apologies to Mrs. Stauffer. 518, I didn't catch that it was in the consent agenda. I've asked to have that pulled separately for separate vote. Anybody else have an item that they would like to have pulled from consent agenda for separate discussion?
Dr. Shore, this is Ed. Just because I have a comment on it, 5.09.
509, so that you're able to comment, all right? All right, so after consent agenda, we'll do 509 first and then 518. Any others? Okay. Based on that, then may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented, except for what is presently 509 and presently 518.
Move to approve. Second.
Thank you, thank you. Oh, Mr. Raber's here. Snuck in on me. And for Mr. Leonard and Mr. Norcross, Mr. Raber and Mr. Walker are present. I think they came in during the public session, public comment session. All right.
Welcome.
All right, so all those in favor of approving the items, the consent agenda items, again, except for 509 and 518, say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed, say nay. Okay, consent agenda items are passed. I have a motion to approve 509, which was previously 509. I'll read it. It's the CSD Director of Athletics job description.
Move to approve.
Thank you. And a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Gagler. All right, Mr. Norcross, you wanted to comment on it?
Yes, and I apologize if this was also discussed last week at our last meeting at committee of the whole, and I'm having some technical issues on the computer here right now. My comment is, several months ago, we had a discussion on the board about budgeting and budget controls. As we begin maybe to do revised job descriptions, or maybe I should say job description updates. Do our job descriptions for those who are responsible. This is one position in particular, for instance, a building principal. Does it specifically spell out the individual's responsibility for budgeting and monitoring? And where I'm going with this, the discussion last meeting was, it is assumed that if you're responsible for a budget, you look at the budget, you follow protocols, you follow procedures. But in today's world, and Tina, especially as an HR director, when the rubber hits the road, just because you assume somebody to do a task doesn't mean they have to do it. Shame on whoever for assuming it. So I guess my question is, does this job description, and are we going to do other job descriptions to make some clear expectations and requirements for one, budget development, and two, budget monitoring and adherence?
All right. I did a search. I couldn't find it. On the bottom of the essential functions, it looks like it's bullet 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It starts out, supervises and coordinates the district budget and finances for all sports programs and sporting events, including inventory and control of uniform supplies and equipment. So I would say that at least that bullet's there, and if we feel that something needs to be amended to that, then we can discuss that.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point, Dr. Shore, and I'm not asking to hold this up tonight, but if we have to amend it, and maybe I just ask that between finance and HR, is that a good enough control for what finance office would expect? And, I just want to put some accountability in it for those who are responsible. Again, as it was discussed, we assume it happens, and apparently in most times it does. But then when it doesn't happen, it just creates a lot of discontent, which is not good for any of us.
Okay. I'm not seeing any deer in the headlights stares at me by Mrs. Stauffer or Mrs. Clever or Dr. Long, but I'll say that we'll look at it again, and if there is something, then we can always come back and amend it. But Mr. Norcross, it seems like you did say you're okay with it still proceeding tonight as written.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor of approving what was 509, the CSD Director of Athletics job description, say aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. Okay. Job description, formerly 509, is approved. We have a motion to approve revision of policy 800, record retention and destruction. It was number 518 in the agenda.
Move to approve.
Thank you. And a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Diller. So I asked, as with the last meeting, for this to be pulled just so that it could be a separate vote, because I do not support the record retention schedule with respect to YouTube. As I said last week, I think that the recording and it helps with an audience, and it helps to be able to go back and look. There are benefits to that, but I also believe that it stifles discussion because everybody can go out to YouTube and do some selective editing. So that's all I said last week, and pretty much still feel the same way. So any other discussion on it?
I'd just like to echo the same thing that you said.
Okay.
I think I understand your concern. I'm not aware of that happening in a local context. I think I'm familiar with what you're talking about, but.
There was an item I mentioned last week that I forget, it was one of the policies that I had said, if it weren't on YouTube, I probably would make a comment. But because it is, I'm not going to. It doesn't happen frequently, but there are times where it's like, I would like to have a more open discussion, but I refuse to do so because it's recorded forever. And I will not be caught in one of those, somebody did a snippet and now Dr. Shore is a fill in the blank.
Right.
Because something's taken out of context.
Perhaps I misunderstood you slightly, because I was thinking about video editing when you said splicing. You're just referring to people taking a comment. Yeah, that makes more sense.
Yep. Okay, any other discussion?
I think it needs to stand. At the end of the day, I feel like, and when I go back and I look all through on YouTube and I pull up the history of all sorts of things, and you really get a chance to see exactly what was going on. We can go back 50 years ago and look at the stuff, and I think that holds us accountable to all sorts of things. We can say, oh, we weren't that way. No, we got proof that, yeah, it was that way. And I think that, for me, I think that's vitally important, because you have record right there. It's not typed. It's not someone else's shorthand or whatever else. It's the exact words of whatever it is that we've said. And as board members, I think we're going to have to, rise or fall on whatever it is that we've said or done here. And I'm for more openness. And if somebody takes something that I say out of context or uses it, then I think that's part of the game plan. And if I find that out, well, hold on, let's look at this YouTube video. Oh no, listen to the whole thing, not just take the snippet. And I think that would exonerate us. But I'm not for removing it. I think it's vitally important for times like now, because you hear the terms fake news, and you hear these different things, and I think these need to be archived for posterity's sake.
I think we have awareness of where, not in this school board context, but where clips are made, and that's what people remember. And if one goes back and looks at the entirety of what was said, that's not what was said. There was selective editing, and unfortunately, short-term memory that's what people remember, and that's what sticks in their head, and that's what's parroted multiple times. But I will say there is benefit to keeping it. I'm not going to dismiss that, to be able to go back and say, yeah, there was a discussion. So I recognize both sides of it. For me, it just the selective editing does not. Those benefits do not outweigh the negative concerns I have. All right, last call then.
I'm supportive. I'm supportive of what Mr. Walker is saying. I will say, to Dr. Scher's point, that there are times in a board meeting where you only get to say a brief comment, and then later on you might think about it and think, I wish I had expanded on that a little bit more because it could be misconstrued. I think that's part of the nature of the job. I would ask that the public, take time to really listen and understand, and be gracious at times too. It could be easy to be critical of public figures, and I think often we deserve that, right? But I think it's good for us all to sit back and think, well, is there another way to look at their comments? Maybe they didn't quite mean that. Maybe I should ask them for clarity on that. So if there are comments that kind of take you aback, I would encourage you to dig in and try to understand.
I would just like to add one other thing that concerns me is we want people to come and speak to us. I feel that is important, but there are times when I'm sitting here as a board member and I know that some things that have been said in public comment may not be accurate or are not accurate, but because we do not interact as a board with the audience, sometimes those things are not clarified. So I'm all about keeping it on YouTube for a period of time, but not indefinitely.
Okay, the pause was for any other comments. Didn't hear anybody else jumping in, so Mrs. Stauffer, do a roll call vote, please.
Dr. Diller?
No?
Ms. Skogler?
Yes.
Mr. Leonards?
No.
Mr. McKee?
Yes.
Mr. Norcross?
Yes.
Mr. Raber?
Yes.
Dr. Scher?
No.
And Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-3.
Okay, thank you. 6.01, may I have a motion to approve the proposed final general fund budget as advertised?
Move to approve.
Second.
Thank you, thank you. Any discussion on the item or questions?
Does this include the X plus Y, or this is just the cost side?
I'm sorry, Mr. Norcross, I didn't hear the question.
Does this include the X
Does this
plus Y, or is this just the cost driver?
Are we referring to the increase for the debt service?
The overall tax increase?
So the overall tax increase here shows 5.4%. I think,
That's the maximum.
right, that's the maximum. So this is still, Mr. Norcross, I think this is still the, we're going to put it out for proposed, right, it's not going to go over 5.4%, but we still have to land on an actual number, whether that's the, the X plus Y. For those that weren't at that finance committee or any subsequent meetings, there was discussion, considerable discussion about how do we make sure, because we know that there's two very large bills that's coming with some remodeling at Cam South and Cam's North, I believe, to the tune of about 20 million each. So we wanted to figure out how can we pull or do something where we don't say, oh, we have an excess amount or whatever, that just goes over. We wanted to instead say this is the amount of an increase that goes for operational items plus X amount that will be earmarked specifically for capital reserve for needs like that. That's what Mr. Norcross is referring to as the X plus Y. And Ed, if you wanted to clarify anything, I just jumped in because of the phone call part.
Yeah, thank you. I apologize with audio also. I must be in a hole here tonight. But anyway, yes, thank you. That answered it. And I guess one other comment. I know we have a finance committee meeting coming up, and maybe at finance we can start getting a little more particular on how we want to frame this. When I say frame it, I'd love to come up with a resolution we can all agree on that, spells us out. We can't control what other boards may or may not do, but we can certainly explain what our intent was, and, it's the will of whatever the next boards are at the end of the day.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Norcross. Just for logistics, Mr. Leonard, did you have anything?
No, a lot of this will be discussed at next week's Finance Committee meeting, which is on Monday the 15th at 6 o'clock.
And what we're voting
And
on,
I encourage, everyone to be there, especially the board members, if they can make it.
And just for clarity, that's going to be here. Go ahead, Ms. Stover.
It's in one of the classrooms. I'll have to pull it up here. Give me one moment.
Okay. So, Mr. McKee, you were asking.
yes, this is just saying that we cannot go above the 5.4% or.
Correct.
or-
It doesn't set the final rate.
Right,
Yes.
okay,
The
thank you.
Finance Committee next week, we'll come up with a recommendation for the board.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Scher, the Finance Committee meeting will be in Cash's room A206.
A206.
Correct.
And the date again?
Monday, the 15th at 6 p.m.
Monday the 15th.
Ed, any other questions on 6.01?
I'll just ask less a question and just I expanded on this at the last meeting, so I'm not going to say as much as I did then, but I think it's really important that we do what we can to address some really important issues here in our district. So obviously the administration has outlined their concerns, needs that they see, and many of these, I think we're locked into if they're contracts or, we can't control healthcare costs, at least not in a big way. But I continue to be concerned about the number of openings we have in the district. We have 94 the last I checked. And I don't know why that is entirely, but I do attribute that to some, we have quite a few positions where we're paying people between $11 and $15 an hour. Custodians, lunch aides, teacher assistants, personal care assistants, bus drivers. And I think those numbers really hurt us. I understand that we're under contract with all of them, but it'd be great if we could build in dollars that could be allocated towards addressing that. I think we're not going to find ourselves in a better position, if we don't take action on that at some point. So I also outlined my concerns about classroom sizes. We have some of the largest classrooms in the state. I mentioned that we have some of the lowest per pupil spending in the state, and I'm hoping we can move on that. And I think this, if we move on this as is, it may move that needle at least a little bit. And then I'm also concerned about the size of our administration. We have Kurt doing 2 or 3 jobs. I mentioned last year at this time, there were 8 positions underneath Kurt. Now it's 4. And then some of those folks, they're doing what used to be a dozen jobs. Now we have 1 or 2 people in a department. When I hear from teachers that feel like they're not adequately supported, that the administration is not responsive, you could take that 2 ways. You could say, well, the administration just isn't there doing their job, or maybe part of it's on us. If we've made drastic cuts, I would anticipate that the administration would not be able to juggle just as many balls as they were last year with less people. And so I especially get concerned with our ELL department. And I know that we've been trying to identify somebody to lead that department. I had one administrator suggest to me that they really thought it should be 2 positions. And they're wondering if maybe that's why we've struggled to find somebody in the role. We're talking about 1,100 students, and we don't have a supervisor. We have 1 person part-time on the side right now currently that oversees that, is my understanding. So I think it's really important that we try to address some of these issues at next week's Finance Committee meeting. I haven't checked my calendar yet to see if I'll be there, but it'd be great if we could have a discussion about that. And even if it's just to say, we're not going to do anything this year, but next year we really need to. We can't just say we're not going to do anything, because all of these things are pretty concerning, and the impact to our schools and to our teachers and to our students, it does add up. So that's all I'll say tonight. I think many of you were here at the last meeting where I shared a little bit more in depth about some of those points. So.
Great, thank you. Any other questions, discussion? Okay, hearing none. Ms. Stauffer, would you do a roll call vote, please?
Sure. Ms. Gogler?
Yes.
Mr. Leonards? Mr. Leonards? Mr.
Sorry,
McKee?
my mic was off. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Mr. McKee?
Yes.
Mr. Norcross? Mr. Norcross?
Yes.
Mr. Raber?
Yes.
Dr. Scher?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
And Dr. Diller?
Yes.
Motion passes 8-0.
Okay, thank you. 6.02, may I have a motion to accept the CDBG grant funds and approve the district use of those funds up to $81,192.
I'll move to approve.
Thank you. And a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. All right, discussion?
Dr. Shore, this is Ed. I have a couple questions here. Did the administration ask the foundation director to prepare the grant, or how did that all come about?
Mr. Norcross, this is Mrs. Stauffer. I received that notification from the borough, and I forwarded it to Ms. Lynch and to Mr. Pisner, who's the Stevens principal, as there had been an initiative, or at least some looking into replacing the playground equipment. And Angie's here, and she can answer any other questions or add to that if she'd like.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Norcross, follow-up to that or other questions?
Has the foundation discussed participating in this?
Yes, sir. Our executive team, because of the tight turnaround, we had not yet had a full foundation board, but the foundation has approved it. Our board for the CASD Foundation approves all of the grants prior to my work on them.
No, I mean participating in the paying the difference.
No, sir.
Excuse me.
Oh, that's okay. No, that doesn't necessarily fall within our budget line item relative to our mission. We're certainly happy to serve as the 501c3 for the school district, but although we, have over $3 million, the vast majority of that is restricted to projects related to teacher grants and student scholarships for higher education and dual enrollment.
Has the foundation tried to solicit from other businesses to help make up the difference?
Well, we have partnered, again, because this was a very quick turnaround. We had the last 2 weeks since the last board meeting, and I've been working very closely with the Friends of Stevens and a number of other community folks to try to get that ball rolling. In 2 weeks' time, we obviously weren't able to raise those kinds of funds. We've received $4,000, $2,000 in cash equivalents, and $2,000 in a promise to give.
So are those funds held at the foundation presently?
Yes, sir. The Friends of Stevens organization is not yet able to solicit gifts because they're not registered with the Bureau of Charitable Organizations. They need some additional information received back from the IRS, and that's my understanding. That's the delay, is the shortage of federal employees to process all of that stuff. So we're acting on their behalf.
So in regards to the mission of the foundation, how do you distribute these funds if it's not part of your mission?
This falls under the special projects guideline, and again, which we take on special projects when suggested by the district as a district partner and approved by our foundation board. So the distribution of that would be, in fact, all the donors that have made any sort of gift to date, they received notification this morning about this discussion and this vote. And we've indicated to them that should this project not be funded, that those funds would still be utilized by the Friends of Stevens with obviously administrative guidance to make some minor repairs.
So there is an avenue for the foundation to participate in this as part of a special, would you call that a special fund?
Project, sir.
Project fund?
To be clear, we don't do brick and mortar projects. This was something that became before us. I believe, sir, I may have even quoted you a number of times, Mr. Norcross, in this process because you had challenged all of the nonprofits supporting the district that when we found a funding stream, perhaps that we could be trying to help. And so we raised a hand and we were able to, Mrs. Stauffer forwarded the opportunity to us, and we thought we would see if we could make some wheels turn. So here we are.
Do you remember a couple years ago when the foundation approached the Career Tech Center to running the capital campaign for the practical nursing building?
Sir, just as a matter of record, the foundation did not approach. The approach came from the Franklin County Career Technology Center by way of Dr. Eric Michael. So the foundation did not initiate that contact. But I'm happy to take any other questions you might have about it.
Dr. Michael wasn't on the Career Tech Foundation. Was he not chairing the foundation when he made his visit to solicit or to offer the assistance?
My understanding was at that time he was also providing substitute administration there. But yes, he was in fact also on the foundation board. But he was approached by but Dr. Michael's not here to tell you exactly what happened, but I was a part of those later conversations, and as the executive director for the last almost 13 years, I did not make that approach. I already have a full-time job. We were happy to help. But that has nothing to do with the playground this evening. So are there other questions related to the playground?
Would the foundation be willing to make it part of a special project and participate in the funding for the playground?
I'm sorry, sir, can you give me just a little bit more clarity on that? You would like us to raise the difference, or?
To participate in the difference, would the foundation consider interested in considering it a special project to help pay the difference?
No, sir,
Part of the difference.
not from.
Participate.
I think we are participating in terms of my grant writing and also the online website and the online donations that we've processed so far. I think we are a full partner, but in terms of out of our regular foundation budget, we don't have the resources that are unrestricted at this time.
Thank you, Mrs. Lynch. Mrs. Stauffer, how much does the Chambersburg School District contribute to the foundation for the salary of the director?
$38,000, ma'am.
I'm sorry, my microphone just died. Yes, this year it will be about $38,000.
Okay, so we do help support that salary. Okay.
Any other questions? Mr. Norcross?
No.
All right, so while we're on the phone then, Mr. Leonard, did you have any?
I don't have any questions. I got just a comment. I noticed, between this and another item on the agenda tonight, I think it's 8.02. If we add those two figures together, I think the playground was 80-some thousand, and the 802 comes to a total of almost $250,000. And here we are in the 11th hour of trying to get a budget together, and I feel like we're piling on at the last minute.
To be clear, we've been talking about this for months. This is not at the last hour. I'm sorry?
No, and the thing is, neither one of these requirements have been bounced against the other unfunded requirements that the district has. There's no prioritization where, these would even make the cut line of the priorities that the district has. And just to, move them up to the front of the line, so to speak, and vote on them tonight, I'm not going to be able to support it until we can mesh these in with the other unfunded requirements.
When will Stevens be priority? Because my experience has been that it's always last. We're talking about the largest school that doesn't have a gym. We're talking about the largest school that doesn't have a cafeteria. We're talking about the largest school that doesn't have a dedicated music room. We're talking about a school that has plywood below our windows. Why is it that this school is always last? And that's not fair. It's not always last. But it feels like it is frequently last on the list, like it's not priority. I don't understand why it's at the bottom. We're renovating several elementary schools with ESSER funding. We renovated 4 last year. The goal was to do 5 total. Which one was last? Stevens.
No, actually it was Grandview, which didn't.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, that's true. I was mistaken. So I really struggle with this idea that it's just not going to be priority ever. I think the reason that this is pressing right now is because we have an opportunity to receive a $35,000 grant. And I believe the deadline was today. They did grant us a one-day extension.
Yes, I have to notify
So-
them by noon tomorrow.
Right, so the reason this is pressing right now is because we have $35,000. But if we don't move on this, we will lose the $35,000. We do have $8,000 in grant monies that were received a decade ago for Stevens. That money has just been sitting there. And we've had $4,000 come in since then. So to be clear, the last time we discussed this, I think we were at 81,000. I think, if I'm doing my math correctly, we have roughly 12,000 now in addition to 35,000. So potentially we have 47,000 towards this project, and we need an additional 69,000. That's the request to the district. If I'm doing my math correctly, we're well on our way. We're asking the district to do their part on behalf of our students. I love this idea of public-private partnership, getting businesses involved, getting the PTO involved, and we have done some of that, right? I do think that we're working with a PTO that, honestly, we do not have a whole lot of money, and we've been at it for years. And that's just the nature of the PTO at Stevens. We've worked diligently for years. We do several fundraisers every year, but $400 bake sales, I did the math on it. If we keep doing $400 bake sales, if we do 3 of them a year, we're talking about 72 years until we have enough money for this. And I've heard from parents at other schools, South Hamilton, they've been fundraising. It's become a cruel joke because there are kids that when they came in kindergarten, they started fundraising for their playground. And now they're in middle school and they still don't have a playground. We can't just keep doing this. Our current plan does not work. So I think it's imperative that the district contributes something towards playgrounds. Do I like the idea of getting career tech involved? Absolutely. Do I like the idea of getting businesses involved? Absolutely. But we should be pitching in as well. And I think the idea that we're not going to spend any money on Stevens, we're going to spend millions of dollars on a stadium, on a gymnasium, on a weight room. What was the total? I mean, I don't know what percentage of that actually went to those 3 things, right? But the total project, we're talking $70 million, something like that. Now that was for expansion as well. So I'm not saying all of that was for that, but we've spent millions of dollars on the Big Kids Playground. But we're going to say we're spending 0 at our lowest income school in the district?
I'd like to speak to the humanities side of this. Growing up on the outskirts of Pittsburgh, in the projects, there was a playground at my projects. And our projects butted up against the elementary school. Everybody in our community was low income, everybody. So there wasn't a lot of monies for vacations, going here, there, or whatever else, but guess where we met at? The playground. Guess where we cut our teeth on learning social, interaction? Guess where I, Lance Walker, I believe the basis of me becoming a personal trainer, becoming a bodybuilder, and so on and so forth, came from those small beginnings of having fitness facilities, and it caused competition because we didn't have a whole lot of money. So, it wasn't in the car that we drove, the sneakers we had, or whatever else. It came down to our athletic prowess. These areas are vitally important for the development of our kids. I'm a recipient of 2 playgrounds, one in my projects and one literally right next door to the elementary school that I went to. And I know for a fact there are a lot of kids who are just like me who came out of that, and I look at these kids here. and I see a lot of them look like me. I see a lot of them are in the same position that I was in. And if we can't look at the humanity side of this thing and understand that there are kids who need this space. When the football team is practicing over there, you got younger kids who are back there playing and doing whatever's going on, or even just after school and during school. This place is vitally important. I get it. We're an educational, organization and whatnot, public schools. But there's also the social aspect and the physical aspect to it. So I beg of you all to look at it from the humanitarian side of things.
Yeah, I'll echo that. I think that in the neighborhood where Stevens is, my daughter transitioned to middle school this year, and she's making new friends, and it's wonderful. I picked her up from a sleepover over the weekend, and her new friend, they have a pool in their backyard. And I don't know anyone in our neighborhood that has a pool. I mean, there's just not a single one. So the importance of a playground in a community like Stevens, I think maybe we might be missing that, like, a lot of kids in our neighborhood, they don't have backyard amenities. Now, this is not just about pools, right? But a playground is just a really crucial place for our kids. And I know when I was growing up, we had a basketball hoop in our backyard, and we had a blast in the yard playing all kinds of sports, right? But a lot of the kids in the neighborhood that we're talking about, they barely have a yard, right? And so the importance of our parks, the importance of our playgrounds, really crucial in a way that if you're used to suburban and rural environments, you might not quite be familiar with that. I'm not saying that you've never spent time in the neighborhood. I'm just saying, like, it's a little different in a low-income neighborhood, the opportunities that you have for stuff like this.
All right, let me go back, Mr. Leonard. I'm not sure that you got to finish.
Oh, my apologies.
That's okay. Mr. Leonard, did you have any other questions or comments?
No, I don't.
Okay. Mrs. Gallagher, you're leaning in.
Yeah, I would like to say that we are not unique in not funding playgrounds. Just had conversation with a retiree from the Waynesboro School District, and they are in the process of raising money for a playground in honor of a deceased teacher. I know from my sister and her family who live in the Tuscarora area that the Fix JB Sports raised all kinds of money for their swimming pool and track and so forth. And so raising money as a community is not something that's unique with Chambersburg. I agree 100% that there needs to be some level of improvement at Stevens. And on the other hand, I think the hastily put together grant probably has some costs that are above and beyond what could be obtained on an independent basis. And I cannot support the amount of money that is being asked for from the district.
Greencastle, I'll just, if I can respond to a comment about other school districts. Greencastle, my understanding is that their last large purchase was district funds. And then there have been several other districts locally where it's been a mix.
Any other comments before I make mine?
I can make mine if you'd like.
Okay.
One of the things that I'm concerned about is there was $8,000 that's been given to Stevens for an outdoor playground that has been sitting there for years on end. So that $8,000, I don't know why that hasn't been already spent and to take care of that, to help with that playground. I really do believe playgrounds are important for kids, but the state of the art equipment doesn't have to be what we have. My concern is, you know, we're going to go into a budget meeting on Monday evening, and there's only so much money. It's just like your checkbook. You only have so much money. So when I go into that budget meeting on Monday and I ask for some teaching assistant help, perhaps at Stevens and other buildings where I know that it is definitely needed, to the tune of $75,000 or even more, I would love to have $150,000 to get some teaching assistants in there, because I want to make sure that our kids are learning to read. Our teachers do a fantastic job, but they need help. So I say to myself, do I approve the $75,000 for a playground when I know there's playground issues across the district, just not at Stevens? I say to myself, well, I believe it's more important that I have teaching assistants helping kids learn how to read than playground equipment. I believe that the community could be involved in a capital campaign for some of these issues that are in the community. Other communities have done it. They've gotten turf fields, they've gotten bathrooms, they've gotten concession stands. There is wealth in the community of Chambersburg as well, and I do believe a capital campaign could address some of these things that we as a district struggle with funding. So, you know, when I go to that meeting Monday night, I don't know if we'll be able to get some teaching assistants. I'd love to have 10 5-hour teaching assistants, but I don't know that that's going to happen, because is it going to meet the budget cuts? So to me, I would rather use that $75,000 to have teaching assistants helping kids to learn to read. Thank you.
This is the cost of having one of the lowest investment amounts per student in the state, is that we're always, I understand we have to deliberate, right? And you can't do everything all at once, right? But when you're in the bottom 10% in the state, the cost of that is that you're always choosing between two things that are really important. It's possible to actually do both, right? But we have to invest in education in our community. We have to invest in our schools. We have to invest in our students in a way that we're not currently doing.
Okay, so I guess my 2 cents on the matter is, you know, this would be one, could have been one topic where there could be YouTube concerns, but I didn't have any particular ones to mention. I look at it that personally, I think this is equipment. This is it's infrastructure. It's something, I'll just say, I think that the district should maintain. I think it should be put on the buildings and grounds rotation. We have 13 elementary schools. It goes on a revolving cycle. This, you know, each year it gets, you know, it gets refreshed however that might need. Things that are broken, it gets fixed, you know, whatever. So I think it just has to be something that's planned and executed on, just as like we have the buildings and grounds, the existing list. To me, this just goes right on. I think it probably hasn't been on because in the past, it's just not been something that the district has said that we would take on. Now, what that means, though, is that, as was just discussed, it goes up, stacks up against other stuff. So what doesn't get done because of, you know, a playground getting updated, well, it might mean we can't do something else. But that's just a realization of how the whole prioritization process works. It also means that if we say a particular elementary is up for its turn for renewal, but it's going to be 10 years from now, obviously it could get, you know, there could be adjustments on priorities, but if somebody wants to do it earlier, a PTA, a community, or whatever, that'd be okay to kick it off. I would just, my personal concern with this is then if it's going to be grants in the future, then it can't be a grant with a string that says, oh, you know, this school is slated for 10 years from now, but if you want the money, you got to pull it up. I just have that concern of what future boards might have to deal with, but it's kind of how it is. So I'm in favor of it only because I think it's something that the district ought to be already maintaining. And it doesn't matter which school. I think it's any of the elementary schools. It's equipment that we have. We need to make sure it's safe. And it doesn't have to be state-of-the-art with, whatever that even state-of-the-art looks like. But it doesn't have to be state-of-the-art, but it needs to be safe. So that's my thought. And I do have concerns about what taking 80,000 or 60,000, whatever, what that means of what else might not get done this year. But that's, again, part of the trade-offs that we get paid all the big bucks for. Oh, wait, I said that on YouTube, so sorry.
Can I add one other thing, please?
Please, yeah, go ahead.
Yes, my understanding is that playgrounds have to be inspected every year. You would not get insurance coverage if your playground would not be inspected.
So to your point, they're not dilapidated. There's always a risk with a playground that somebody's going to get injured. We see that with new playgrounds, but it's not going to, probably not because of defective or something like that equipment. Because of the inspection, right, Dr. Diller?
Correct.
Okay. All right, any other
I'll
discussion? Go ahead.
just, to respond to that, we do have a safety report for Stevens. One of the questions on the report is the playground and other outdoor areas free of unsafe surface protrusions or holes? And the answer is no. So I do have concerns with our own safety reports. It does seem like there are some issues there that we ought to be addressing as well. I don't know how often the safety reports get reviewed and how that gets worked into our prioritization efforts. But as we think about this in the long run, that might be something that we incorporate. All right, what are the safety reports showing that are really urgent? And this goes beyond just the playground discussion for tonight, but I think that might be something that we want to make sure that we address, because there's a liability there if the safety reports are showing major issues and we're not doing anything about it.
Okay, other discussion? Okay, hearing none, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Leonards?
No.
Mr. McKee?
No.
Mr. Norcross?
No.
Mr. Raber?
Yes.
Dr. Schur?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Dr. Diller?
No.
Ms. Gogler?
No.
Motion fails 3-5.
7.01, settlement agreement. We have a motion to approve the settlement agreement as presented.
I'll move to approve.
Thank you. And second?
Second.
Thank you. Mr. Woodman, I think you said this is an item that we had discussed previously.
Yes, we spent some time in 2 different executive sessions on this. This is basically what we agreed to. This is it coming back for signature and board approval this evening.
Okay. Given the prior discussion, I think we can just do we don't need to do a roll call. So all those in favor of approving the settle agreement as presented, say aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. 701 settlement agreement passes. We have a motion to approve 702, which is the revision of policy 141, e-learning. I'm sorry, I don't need a motion. I'm just it's information. So thank you, Ms. Glover. Is there anything we wanted to call out on this? I think it was, you're going to refresh me, but you're going to say this is one that the policy committee reviewed, and it's here for information because after review, no changes were deemed to be necessary. So for awareness. 8.01, we have a motion to approve the personnel actions as presented.
Move to approve.
Thank you. And a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion or questions?
I got, I guess, a question. I see there's 29 total lines on here. Employee separations, transfers, new assignments, leaves, substitutes, and corrections. what I'd like to see is the list that Mr. Rayburn refers to, that where we have 90-some, vacancies, because this doesn't show it.
Yeah, we could include that in one of the future packets, or, we can include it here for future reference. It is something
I think it'd be, I
Yeah.
mean, Mr. Rayburn keeps bringing it up, and so
Yeah.
I think, it'd be helpful if the public and the board members, could see it, all see it together.
Yeah, it's emailed out weekly, but I think
Yeah,
it also would.
but yeah, it's emailed, yeah,
Right.
right, but I'm saying for public meetings like this, I think it should be.
Yeah, I get you.
If Mr. Rayburn's gonna bring it up, I think we need to include it as part of our board meeting.
Yeah, I think it's a good point, and we can always call out the vacancies that
Or
we-
could it be pulled up? We get that report each week on the number of vacancies. Does Mrs. Clever have that report that she could tell us if it's close to 90?
She's got I think her computer just got a software upgrade.
And that's okay, but I agree with Mr. Leonard. I mean, it's a matter of, it's another attachment for the minutes, for the public, why not? Just put it out there.
And you might get somebody interested in some of those vacancies.
Yeah. Mrs. Clever's pulling up she's literally, her laptop's warming up here type of thing. I'm looking at it on my phone. There are a lot of lines here, but it's not displaying for me an Excel type of format that gives me the count. And I'm not going to try to do that quickly. There are just a couple call-outs. See, 12 in elementary school teaching area, 21 for instructional support staff, middle school teaching 7, pupil services department 6.
Just a quick calculation, I came up with 86.
Okay.
But we have to remember that we do not pull any posting down until the replacement has been officially board approved. So there's probably some positions on here still posted, but we're approving
Okay.
tonight to backfill.
Okay, I'll repeat that for public and those on the phone. Ms. Glover said quick, I think you said like 84-ish, 84, 86, et cetera, is what she got from the report that came out to us last Friday. And she cautioned that the posting doesn't completely come down until we have approved for that position to be filled. So while the number does say, 80, mid-80 something, there are some that will come down after tonight, after those positions are filled. So it's somewhere south of 80, at least from last week's report.
And so where does you mentioned the number 40, where did that come from? 40 something.
I was filling in until Mrs. Clever was able to pull up her thing. I don't know if I said 40.
Is that like a bottom line number you said, like after?
No, she said
after
bottom line
tonight?
of the report that came out was around 80, I'll just say 85, plus or minus.
Yeah, I'd like to see that, and I think the public should see it. And also, if there's if they could identify what the salary range is for each of those positions, or at least the beginning salary range.
Okay. Mrs. Clever's got that as a note. But I like the idea. We can include it in this section of the agenda minimally or at the bottom as an information item. Okay, any other questions or discussion? on 801 personnel actions? Okay, hearing none, we'll just do one of the verbal things. All those in favor of passing 801 as presented, say aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. Okay, 801 passes. 802, personnel actions. May I have a motion to approve the personnel actions for new positions in the proposed final 23-24 general fund budget?
Move to approve.
Second.
Thank you, thank you. Questions, discussion?
Again, for the same reason as the playground, these are positions that are, being identified here at the 11th hour, and we don't really have them stacked up or prioritized, with the other unfunded requirements. So we need to, and again, between this action and the playground, I think it came to almost $250,000, so it just like that, we're adding $250,000 more into the budget at the last minute. So I'm not saying they're not, neither one of them, or I'm not saying either one of them are not needed, but there hasn't been much discussion. Well, on the instructional specialists, are they the reading specialists? Or are these substitute teachers, or not substitute teachers, but assistant?
Yeah, Mr. Whitman.
This was discussed in, I think, 2 finance meetings ago, where we first brought up these are instructional specialists that will be providing intervention, and we brought it up that we wanted to put these, asked the.
No, but I mean, my question is, are they the I call them reading specialists. Is that what they are?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I just wanted that clarification. Thank you.
Okay, other questions? Okay, hearing none, and again, verbal. All those in, regular vote as I've been doing. All those in favor of approving the personnel actions as presented, say aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. Okay, 802 passes. 803, acting superintendent. I may have a motion to appoint Dr. Larry Redding as the acting superintendent effective July 1, 2023.
Move to approve.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion, questions?
Dr. Shore, just one comment, and you mentioned it in your opening with Dr. Redding's experience. Just one specific part of that. Dr. Redding has served in this role as acting superintendent as well. So he brings a lot of experience to us, and I think that'll be very helpful.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, all those in favor of approving Dr. Larry Redding as the acting superintendent effective July 1, say aye.
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 All those opposed, say nay. Okay, motion passes. And Dr. Redding's here with us. Some greetings. Yeah, sure. You have 3 minutes. Get the timer started.
I thank you for your vote of confidence in my experience, and certainly my journey through public education. Certainly it feels good to be continue providing service to public education. I've been an advocate for all my life, and see this as a short-term opportunity. And I want to clarify that this is enticing because I know there's an end date, and it hopefully coincides with the new superintendent arriving as soon as possible to take over. My job certainly to work with the board in this transition, to keep all the oars moving in the same direction, to provide another set of hands, another set of eyes, another set of experiences that could be of value to the district, keeping those lines of communication open, especially with the board and the community, the administration, the staff. Look forward to starting July 1 and being of service as long as necessary, but as soon as satisfactory replacement is found. So look forward to it. Thank you.
Understood. Thank you. We look forward to it as well. 9.01, committee reports. So Mr. McKee, it's the first
No,
meeting
sir.
month. Okay. All right, I'll go down then. Mrs. Gallagher.
We'll be discussing in the committee of the whole the roof project at the Career Center that the JOC discussed. The annex is well over 40 years old and needs a roof replacement. That's probably the biggest thing from the Career Tech.
Hey, Mr. Walker.
I'm happy to say that we're moving forward with the transportation situation. So, yeah, we got that resolved.
Okay. Dr. Dillard doesn't have anything. Mr. Raver.
No, I said no, I don't have anything.
Oh, you're good. Okay. All right. So then I'll mention about policy committee, and then we'll go to the phone. So policy committee met, and everybody's heard me talk several times about beginning a school year and how the challenges we had last year with late enrollments and the havoc that created, et cetera. So policy committee and administration looked at policy 200, which was actually recently updated through the lens of, could we put a date, could we do a cutoff, could we do anything like that? And really what we found, or not found, but went back to is in the policy itself, it does say that once an enrollment, I'm going to try to find it so I don't misquote. I had it up, now it's rebooting or whatever. Apologies, I actually did have it ready. All right, so it's policy 200, enrollment of students under guidelines. It says under guidelines would be the third or the fourth bullet. The district shall normally enroll a school-age eligible student the next business day, but no later than 5 business days after application. So we do strive to get to the next business day in so much as possible, but I think what I would support administration doing is that when we get to that critical time in the school year, we do need to pivot from continuing to enroll and taking care of all of that at the expense of holding everything else up. At some point, we need to pivot and say, we got to get schools open and ready in a non-chaotic manner, or as little chaos as possible. And that might mean that we need to leverage the 5 days for some people. I encourage administration to say, if somebody enrolls and they enroll late or whatever, and we're in that time frame, if somebody jumps up and down, we just say, is it within the 5 days? And if it is, then call me back after 5 days if it's not resolved. But that's not what administration is going to do. They'll seek to get it placed as quickly as they can. But I encourage that if that happens, again, we got to get to the point where we get things open and have less disruption than trying to hold out to get a couple more addressed. Kind of with that, though, in that same discussion we had, we looked at, well, what are the challenges that we typically have? When you say, well, we get this. So what did we experience a lot last year? Well, we have classrooms. Where's the kid going to go? Which school? Well, that one's kind of full already. So then we got to juggle all that kind of stuff. Then everything that's related to that. The other area is transportation. So we went back and pulled it up, and there is I think it's under state statute, Mr. Z can hit the buzzer if I misstate, that we don't technically have to provide transportation, except in perhaps a few extenuating circumstances. So what's that mean? Well, it means that we could say, well, we could get the student enrolled, we can get them in this school, but transportation's not going to be ready. So it's your responsibility to get them to that school until the transportation, the bus routes or whatever is adjusted and able to provide that. He says, if we provide transportation, we've got to do it for everybody. And they will. It's just that they might not be able to get it like day one. So, anyhow. So, obviously, that's something that we'll continue to look at, but no changes to policy is what we felt are needed.
Excuse me. Just on a sidebar, too, is with the renovation of the central office for the school district, I really believe we need to get some signage up so that when people come to register, they know it's at the high school. And that really would help. It would help to have some signage over where the renovations are happening. Also at the new admin building, where you use the front door, because it's only once you get up to the door that you can figure anything out. But I think some signage in the yard would be very helpful as we make this transition to make sure parents know where to register and have a comfort level of what to do.
I'd also like to piggyback off of what Dr. Shore said as far as enrollment. At the beginning of this school year, I went to transportation the very first day of school, and you talk about chaos. Man, my hat goes off to transportation for, I saw sticky notes and notes here and a phone and a walkie-talkie and another phone, and they were going back and forth. It looked like the octopus in there trying to put these fires out. First day of school, and I was only there for a half a day. So I can only imagine whenever you're talking about late enrollments and the jockeying and the shuffling that they have to do to get these kids to school. So I just encourage everyone who may be listening, or if you have friends or family, to encourage them to get their children enrolled as soon as possible.
And Mr. Woodman said before that from an enrollment perspective, we're earlier. I mean, the numbers are higher than what we were last year at this time. So the belief is that people are hearing the message, and we won't have a repeat because people are hearing the message and getting their kids enrolled. So I think they're got to balance it with a good message as well. We don't believe again that that's an increase because of new people moving in. It's not like a total numbers increase. It's just we believe that the numbers will be roughly the same, but it's just that we're getting the enrollments earlier, which is what we wanted. And Dr. Diller, thanks for the comment about the in making sure that it's clear where. All right. Any other on the phone? Mr. Norcross for committee reports.
No, Ms. Gosler covered that. Thank you.
Okay. And Mr. Leonards.
Just what was mentioned earlier, the Finance Committee meeting is this Monday, the 15th at 6 p.m.
Okay, got it. And we'll move to then 10:01. Members of the audience are invited to comment on non-agenda items. So 3 minutes as before. And Mrs. Jordan.
I was hoping not to have to speak during this public comment. I am disappointed. Grants typically are funded by public money, and I'll tell you how I know this. I've read this. A few years ago in my former town, with the former mayor, they funded one of the streets. The street cost $900,000. In that case, there was no grant money, but they're doing a project right now in my former town, and they got a grant. The new mayor got a grant. In fact, the old CFO is leaving, and I watched their council meeting the other night. That woman brought in $5 million in grant money in 1 year's time. So she's leaving, and her name is Bonnie Fleming. So Bonnie, I hope you have a nice retirement. This is what happens. This is what happens. I want you to think about this. It's too late now, but maybe before the meeting's over, you want to do this again. You want a do-over. You want a do-over. Maybe there's some way that some of you will think about this. That's how it works. Maybe some of you now will write a check. And I'm going to find out which people did through the foundation up here tonight. I know some of you have a hell of a lot more money than I do. I know one woman in particular that does, and she's my board rep, my regional rep.
All right.
I'm disappointed. You're going to do an annex roof, okay? You're doing that. I didn't check the cost on that. I wanted to shame you people. I don't know if you can do this over again tonight so that that lady can submit the grant. I mean, we're talking $81,000. Grants are a match. Some of them are 20-75, some are 50-50, but that's how it works. Maybe you don't understand this, but grants are good. Grants are good. I don't know. I want to stand up here for 3 minutes and complain. I hope the board changes. That poor woman did a lot of work, and she should be praised.
Thank you, Mrs. Jordan. To be clear, writing grants is part of my role for the CASD Foundation. It's been a pleasure to serve as the 501c3 arm for the district to write grants. To clarify, not all of our donors wish to make their donations public. So in order to follow the donor Bill of Rights, not every donor's gift is made public. So to be clear about that. I also just wanted to leave the meeting tonight with more of a feel-good. This is not an adversarial relationship. I'm not here to kick and scream, and Angie Lynch wrote this grant and she wants to get credit for it. No, we had an opportunity. We had hoped we would be funded in full. We wanted the entire playground to be covered. It wasn't. Okay, so we're shelving this, and then we'll take a breath, and then we'll come back and come up with a better plan. Obviously, the timing for this plan wasn't right. So we should have a hand-in-glove relationship between the foundation and the district and the school board. This is not an adversarial situation. We are partners to benefit all children, K-12 in the district. So I want to thank all of you for your support, and we'll just keep coming back around until we turn over the right stone. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. All right, then the last one that I see is Ms. Berman.
Good evening. My name is Nicole Berman, and I am here tonight to share some exciting news. About a week and a half ago, my kids go to Scotland. We have a community garden there, and we were there. I was there with the PTA president, and we just so happened to have a conversation about all of the balls going into the pit and how they're losing the balls in the pit, and it's just this big muddy mess. And she's like, we just bought all these new balls and I'm not buying any more balls, but we have this huge amount of money that we can spend. And I said, oh really? Because I'm not on the PTA, which I will be now. So I said, well, have you heard about what's going on with Stevens and that they're trying to raise money to get playground equipment? And I sent her the links to the page that Angie had set up and sent her the presentation that Angie had presented at the board meeting. And She presented the information to the Scotland PTA at their meeting last week. And they unanimously voted not just to donate money, but they are donating $2,000 to Stevens, designated to the playground. It's not, it is designated to that. And I am very proud to be part of this community, that we are a giving community. We are a loving community. And we do need to provide for our kids, not just the kids at Scotland, not just the kids at Fayetteville, all of them. They are our responsibility. And we as community members and board members and staff, we need to rally and we need to be part of this. So thank you to all of you who worked on writing this grant. And all I can say is, if you're not happy, go vote next week, May 16th.
Okay, thank you. That's all that I see on the attendance sheet. Okay, go ahead. Just your name, please.
I didn't know that I would wish to speak. Renata Mosley Harper, the pastor of John Wesley African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church, 155 West Catherine Street, Chambersburg, PA, in the heart of the 3rd Ward. I'm an alum of Thaddeus Stevens Elementary School, and I stand here today, and tomorrow the Friends of Stevens will be able to get their picnic tables. I will be calling on my family and friends that are alum of Thaddeus Stevens Elementary School, and we will support the capital campaign, and my church and I personally are going to then be able to give, because I don't want any child that goes to Thaddeus Stevens Elementary School to grow up thinking that they are less than or that they do not count. So I stand here today and I make my commitment that you will have my support. And I didn't know that Mr. Widman was going to be leaving, but I want to personally thank you for your transparency and for your caring for the school and the community. I thank you so much, and our prayers for your continued success will be yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And let me just clarify the last. It's only the acting superintendent part. He's still assistant and will be resuming the role that he had before, so we're still blessed to have him.
We are. I thought it might be a different role.
Exactly. That's what I want to clarify.
All right. Just so we're clear.
Yep. Great.
I'm not
Thank
a
you.
prophet, but I had hoped.
All right. Thank you. All right, then I'll announce that we will have an executive session immediately after the COW, Committee of the Whole, on a confidential student matter. So with that, the regular board meeting is adjourned. All right, and I didn't see anybody itching to get up, so let's just keep on trucking. All right, so we don't have an 11 o'clock meeting. We didn't run until 11 o'clock again. All right, let's jump into 1.01 on the Committee of the Whole, the financial audit. Mrs. Stauffer and
Yes, thank you, Dr. Scherer. I'd like to introduce Kevin Stauffer from Smith, Elliott & Kearns, and I always have to say this, Kevin and I are not related. He's going to present our audit from this past year.
Thank you very much. Good evening again. My name is Kevin Stauffer. I'm a member of the firm with the accounting firm Smith, Elliott, Kearns & Company, or SEK. I'm going to go through the results from your June 30, 2022 financial statement audit. So the presentation that I have is just a high-level summary. What I've tried to do is summarize the results of the audited financial statements, your management letter, and your required communications with those charged with governance. So I've tried to take 120 pages and condense it down into a 5 to 10 minute presentation for you here this evening. Before diving into the details, overall I just wanted to present the results, high-level summary. Overall, I think you'll be very pleased with the results of the audit this year. First and foremost, we were able to issue an unmodified audit opinion, which is the best opinion that we can issue on the financial statements. Overall, there was an increase in fund balance in most of the funds this year. And we did have one finding that we did have to report on related to federal awards. So I'll dive into that once we get to those details there. So the second bullet point on the first page just references an unmodified audit opinion, which once again is the best opinion that we can issue on our financial statements. But what exactly does that mean? Essentially, we feel that in our opinion, the financial statements are materially correct and can be relied upon. It is not an opinion or results of an internal controls, nor is it opinions or results of a fraud investigation. I know sometimes people hear the word audit, they think that we look at every transaction. Although it may feel like it to Danette every year that we're here, it feels like we look at every transaction. Again, we're performing sampling to ultimately issue that opinion, and again, we were able to do so this year. The third bullet point references our single audit, where we look at, that's a little bit of a misnomer, the single audit terminology there, where certain federal programs are looked at. This year, we actually had to test 3 different federal programs, the IDEA cluster, the ESSER program, as well as the ECF, the Emergency Connectivity Fund program. So overall, we didn't have any findings related to both IDEA or ESSER. And overall, with the ECF program, we did have one finding specifically related to the procurement, suspension, and debarment. What happened there was the vendor that was utilized to purchase the equipment wasn't checked to verify that they were not suspended or debarred, which is a requirement of the federal grant. What happened was that grant wasn't realized it was federal at the time it was entered into. The vendor itself was not suspended or debarred, but because that process did not take place, that's why it's reported there. So very minor in my opinion, but again, we did have to report on it there within the financial statements. Financially, for the year, the fourth bullet point there, overall the general fund did have an increase in fund balance this year of about $340,000, and that is after transfers of about $5.2 million to the other funds. So those transfers were about $3.7 million to the Capital Reserve Fund, and another $1.5 million to the Medical Insurance Fund. Overall, for the year, the general fund revenues totaled just under $170 million, and the federal revenues did increase to almost $14.5 million. There's a graph that I'll get to in here in just a little bit that shows the overall increase in the federal dollars over the past several years. The expenditures within the general fund were just under $165 million. Overall, that was an increase compared to the previous year, partially because of spending of the ESSER funds on the various elementary school projects, as well as an increase in the salaries and benefits. For the food service fund, overall an increase in that position of about $2.2 million, mainly a function of the reimbursement for all the free meals that were provided to the students during the 2022 fiscal year. And finally, financially, the medical insurance fund did have a decrease in that position of about $1.8 million. That did include, again, the transfer of $1.5 million from the general fund, just meaning that the claims exceeded the charges for the premiums during the current year. The next to last bullet point that we had is just a required communications letter. Had there been any significant issues in completing the audit or disagreements with management on accounting principles, we'd have to report on those here in this letter. I'm happy to report there were no such issues or disagreements. We just considered our standard communications letter. The last bullet point just references our management letter. That goes through the details there of the accounting pronouncements that will be effective in upcoming years. I won't bore you with those details here tonight, but we did go through those with management and provided those in detail. The rest of the management letter and the rest of my analysis here is just some graphical analysis for the year. So the first graph that we had just shows the governmental activities, and it shows the assets, liabilities, and net position. So it's the first graph on the second page. This is reported under the full accrual basis of accounting. And overall, you can see the deficit net position. There's nothing alarming there. Every school district is recording their proportionate share of the PSERS liability for the overall underfundedness of the PSERS plan, and that's what's driving that negative net position there during each of the past 5 years. Moving down to the bottom of the graph, you'll see the general fund revenue breakdown. Overall, you'll see a slight increase in taxes for 2022 of about 1.6%. Just a reminder, that is all taxes. Obviously, it primarily consists of real estate taxes, but it also consists of the EIT, as well as the transfer tax that are included there. Under the state sources, you'll see an overall increase a little bit over the past several years, mainly due to the 1/2 reimbursement from the state for the PSERS reimbursement each of those fiscal years. And then on the far right, here's where you can see the overall fluctuation in the federal sources. Back in 2018 through 2020, the federal sources were right around $4 million. Last year, about $7.1 million, and this year, about $14.5 million. So again, the ESSER funding coming in and the additional revenues there during 2022. On the next page, a lot of times we get asked the question, how do we compare to other school districts? So this graph does try to offer that. This is 1 year behind just to offer those comparisons. So at the top is Chambersburg School District, in the middle are LIU schools, and then at the bottom are school districts of similar size. So we tried to break that down to offer those comparisons. And you can see when you look at these graphs, overall fairly consistent across the board. Obviously, taxes being the largest source of revenue of just over 60% for Chambersburg, state sources 31%, and federal sources 5%. Again, you can see within a couple percentage points of very comparable to LIU schools and even more so to school districts of a similar revenue stream. On the next page, I'll just turn your attention now briefly to the expenditure side of things. So at the top, we're looking at the expenditures within the general fund by function. So you can see the overall increase in the instruction are about 10% or $10 million compared to the previous year. And the other fluctuation is towards the right, the facilities acquisition, construction, and improvements. Those are the spending of the ESSER funds for the elementary school projects that were incurred during 2022. The bottom graph here is the same expenditures, only instead of looking at it by function, it's now looking at it by object. So overall, you can see the increase in the salaries for 2022 of about $4.5 million, or about 7.5%, and a similar increase within the benefits of about $3.5 million, or about 9%. And then the other fluctuations within the purchase property and technical services and purchase property services, again, due to spending of the ESSER funds during the year. On the next page, it just turns your attention now briefly. Again, it offers the comparison graphs to an expenditure side of things. Again, I get 1 year behind for Chambersburg at the top and then LIU schools in the middle and school districts of a similar size at the bottom. So obviously the largest source of expenditures are those salaries and benefits. For Chambersburg Area School District, about 67%. For school districts in the LIU, about 62%, and around 64% for school districts of a similar size. The other item I wanted to point out is at the top. It's actually split between the top two items, the maroon category there along with the dark gray. Those are your debt service as well as your transfers. So for Chambersburg, that totaled about 9%. LIU schools, that's about 14%. And school districts of a similar size, around 13%. So again, Chambersburg School District, a little bit less in the debt service category in comparison to other school districts. On the next page are just the expenditures per ADM as defined by PDE. So the expenditures for average daily membership for Chambersburg Area School District for 2021 averaged just over $15,000, where LIU schools were about $18,000, and all school districts within Pennsylvania around $17,300. So just to offer that comparison there for the expenditures per ADM. And then the graph on the bottom just provides a status of the fund balance in the general fund. Again, it's breaking it down by the different categories that are reported within the financial statements. But overall, you can see the increase in fund balance over the past 5 years from about $7.4 million back in 2018 to at the end of 2022, about almost $32 million. The bulk of that obviously being within the assigned category for future assignments, as well as committed fund balances as well for future tax relief. And then the final graph on the last page just offers a capital reserve fund balance comparison. So again, overall, you can see how the capital reserve was less than $1 million in 2020, and how that again has been built back up to about $6.2 million at the end of 2022. So just again, in summary, overall, I think fairly positive results stemming from the audit this year. Happy to report that we were able to issue the unmodified audit opinion. Positive year, I think, financially for the school district, and again, did have the one finding related to the ECF, but overall fairly insignificant to the overall program. I knew that was a lot of information. I know it was a little bit longer than the 3 minutes that everybody else was allowed, but I don't think I can talk for less than 3 minutes about accounting to anyone. But I'm certainly happy to open up for any questions on my presentation or from the audit documents themselves.
On the phone, any questions or comments?
Just a comment. I'm very pleased with the report. It's been consistent with prior years. It's always, you know, the best opinion, the unmodified opinion every year that I've been on the board. So just a reflection on the finance office and all the people that work in there.
I was gonna, I teed that up for Mr. Leonard's, but I was gonna say, each year you show up and it's like, or SEK shows up and it's like, oh, okay, yeah, we kind of expect the same thing. That's why you can get it down to like 4 minutes. It's kind of like, same as last year, things are rolling good.
Absolutely.
And it's always good, but it's always good to hear.
Certainly.
I have one question or one curious thing. It could be a takeaway. Some of the charts, like on page 3, 4, it had the pie charts comparing us to LIU and other schools with over 100 million in revenue. But the ADM then has Chambersburg against LIU versus all PA school districts. Do you have the ADM for other districts that have over 100 million in revenue?
Unfortunately not. The way that the data is presented from PDE, when we pull it down from the website, it's slightly different for that calculation. So
Okay.
that's why we had to include it in total and not split it
I
apart.
figured if you had it, you'd throw it on here, but
Yes.
it's, given some of the conversation we had earlier tonight, it's like, that would have been an interesting one also to see.
Certainly.
But, I mean, even page 6, it shows, in comparison to our geographically close districts, we're still per pupil about 3,000 less. So, all right, other questions, comments?
Am I correct, our LIU includes 25 local schools? Is that how many are currently part of that?
It's everybody, yeah. It's Franklin, Adams, and York.
Yeah, okay.
And all that brings. You get the whole gamut of school sizes and types. Anything else?
Well, thank you very much
Yeah.
for your time this evening. We at Smith Elliott Kearns Company appreciate doing a service for the district. If you have any questions after tonight, please feel free to either contact me or filter those through administration. We'd be happy to answer them. Thank you very much.
Thanks for enjoying the first part of the meeting. All right, so as always, we'll go through the agenda items proposed here, and if we don't have, if I don't hear otherwise, they'll go on the consent agenda for the 25th, meeting on the 23rd? Okay, 23rd, whatever it is, 2 weeks from now. All right, 201, Franklin County Career and Tech Budget.
Yes, the administration recommends the approval of the Career Tech 23-24 budget. You will notice that this represents a $78,300 increase over last year. This increase has been captured in the proposed final budget for us.
I think as we said before, Mr. Norcross has brought up, and Mrs. Gallagher, this is somewhat the fluctuation of attendance, right? The rolling 3-year average.
That's correct. For instance, last year, year over year, it went down, I think, 42,000, Mrs. Stauffer? Somewhere around that number?
That sounds, I'm looking at Danette, but it sounds like
Just
that would be-
ballpark, just
yeah,
ballpark,
pretty
yeah.
close.
Yeah, so it does fluctuate with the ADM, absolutely.
Any other questions on it, or item, or discussion? Okay, consent agenda. 202, the annex roof funding resolution.
Yes, so the administration was asked by the FCCTC business manager to present this to our board. As Ms. Gogler and Mr. Norcross mentioned, the annex at the FCCTC roof is in need of repair. They are presenting 2 options to us. If you open up the attachment, Scott, that says I'm sorry, my computer is locking up here. The one that says the FCCTC, or excuse me, the board meeting 4/27/2023. As I understand this, the project is going to cost about an estimated $1.2 million. They are offering us 2 options. One would be to consider paying this, or our portion, upfront, which would be due August 1st. That portion, or our share of the debt, or whatever the cost of the roof project would be, is 41.72%. So that estimated cost, if we would go with a upfront payment, would be $500,640. The alternative would be for PFM to offer a competitive bank loan, and that would be over 10 years. And if you scroll down to it's page 3, Scott, it will show you the amortization schedule and our effort for that. So over the life of the 10-year loan, the cost to the Chambersburg School District would be $687,315. And again, these are estimates based on the factors that Mr. Fry would have had at the time. The board would be recommending either to proceed with a resolution to, again, either fund this upfront, payment due August 1st, or to participate in the loan for the FCCTC.
And Dr. Shore, if I can just add a little more information from the JOC meeting. This is an actual bid. Well, it's a CoStarz, so it is a good price, a set price, if you will, for just a replacement of the roof. However, there is no contingency in this. They're in the bid. I don't know if Mr. Peters is in the room or not, but he'll probably nod his head at this. I mean, per CoStarz, there are unit prices for additional repair work, build up if you need it. Unfortunately, these flat rubber roofs, they do have a tendency, once you tear them off, you're going to have some extras on it. So there is a possibility. The funding and the borrowing that Career Tech Center did is based on the as-bid unit price. There may be additional depending on what they find once they tear the roof off. So just a caveat with that, it's a flat roof. These rascals have a habit of growing. Hopefully it doesn't grow too much with the extent of the repair work.
So Mr. Woodman did the quick math here on the phone at $186,675 would be the difference of what we would pay if we financed it instead of paying cash. Is there a recommendation as far as financing, or first I got a question. Was this like a surprise or something that the roof needed replaced, or is this planned? It seems like,
I mentioned it in my report back at the beginning of April.
Okay.
That's when it was first, I believe the first time it was presented at Career Tech, and just like our projects at the district, they're looking to get it done while school is out. I don't know, maybe Mr. Woodman can speak if there was any additional discussions at the superintendent's meetings.
No, he just says that they were going to mention last time that it was going to get sent out to business managers. I'm just thinking from the Franklin Learning Center perspective. They got the plans, other plan like HVAC like 6 years from now, in part because they have to budget for it, put it in reserve, and then basically save up for it because they can't float any loans or anything. So this one was kind of like, seems like, I don't know, like would have thought we knew about it before just getting notified.
First of all, as I mentioned, it's the original roof from 1978, and so if you think about your own house roof, not very many roofs last for more than 40 years.
Yep. Sounds like it's needed. Other questions, comments? I think we're going to need to know, though, do we want to talk about this? And since we have a finance committee in between, we can dive into whether finance comes out and says we think we should opt in for the loan or to go with cash. And then we can put it as a separate voting item on the next agenda, or on the 23rd.
Okay.
And Mrs. Stauffer, John Fry from PFM, he stated he had a conversation with you prior to our JOC meeting also regarding this.
Yeah, it was earlier that week he had given me a call. Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
All right, 203, committed fund balance approval.
Yes, this is an annual item. We're asking the board to allow us to place excess earned income tax over the budget into a committed fund balance that will be used for future taxpayer relief.
All right, consent agenda, keep on rolling, 204.
Okay, 204. I did report in my board report that our charter school cost is running high this year. We had budgeted, I believe it was $6 million in the current year's budget. We're anticipating that we're going to need another $840,000, so we're asking the board to allow us to utilize the assigned fund balance to cover this increased cost. If you open up the attachment, I want to thank Bobby in my office for putting this together. It'll show you a little bit of what the cost drivers are, and we do have this on the Finance Committee to go into further detail. Two primary factors. One, the number of special education students are higher this current school year than they were in the prior year. And also that cost has gone up significantly over the last decade, but you can see the difference between a regular education cyber charter student is just a little over $11,000 that we're spending, and our special needs cyber charters are costing us just around $25,000 per student.
I know you said you will cover it in finance. The 25, that's still more than what special ed costs us in-house, right?
Yes, the way that the cyber charter cost is is figured out is you're utilizing the budget dollars, so it's what we're budgeting, and that's how they come up with the tuition cost or the tuition rate.
Yeah, it just seems, in this to me, it strikes me as interesting in that we hear how we have a great special ed department, but yet we still have this number that choose not to come here. Seems like conflicting messages or something. All right, and you just acknowledge, you also said we'll dive into it a little deeper at the Finance Committee.
Correct.
All right, so, yeah, unless something, let's plan to put it on consent agenda, unless something monumental or whatever comes out of the Finance Committee.
Okay.
That we would want to have, again, a broader group discussion or something like that on it. 205, Gallagher Insurance.
Dr. Shore, just
Yes.
a quick, obvious comment I'd like to make on this, that, this topic has come up multiple times. I believe it even came up this evening in public comment. The district, we are not the driver of these bills. We don't have an option, whether we can or cannot pay these bills. It's the way the system is set up. As twisted and as convoluted as what it is. And, we do have instances where staff recommends placement for some of these students, outside placement. And so, we're not the driver of this. We just have to pay the bill and write the check when the bill comes.
Yep. Okay, thank you. 205, Gallagher Insurance.
Yes, the administration recommends approval of the 23-24 insurance premiums and carriers as presented. The increase is a little less than what we were projecting. We were projecting around a $41,000 increase to our premiums. It actually came in at $31,314. The big difference was our workers' comp has gone down. This is due to the size of the payroll and what was being projected at the time. I want to thank Bobby in my office again. She's been doing a lot of work, so we recommend approval of this.
Great. And cyber insurance went up $4,000.
Yeah,
and that's despite doing the multi-factor.
Yes, the
What
other
doors?
notable increase was our property, and the majority of that is due to the values of the property going up.
Okay, again, little pause there. Hearing no questions, we'll put that consent agenda and move to 206.
I'll take that one for it's under Danette, but I'll go ahead and talk so she doesn't have to get up. So again, this was in the Friday report. We are seeing our substitute cost rate is still averaging $50,000 to $60,000, $70,000 a week. As a result of that, we need to do a budgetary transfer. We're projecting a need of $422,000 to get us through the end of the year. I believe this current year we had $1.8 million in the existing budget, so we are projecting that we will be around $2.2 million of substitute cost for the current school year.
Okay, consent agenda. 207, budget transfer for pupil service and special ed.
Get to that. I have to get back to the agenda item I was on. There we go. This is a budget transfer totaling $775,189 for special ed and pupil services to recover the cover the remaining pupil service and special ed invoices coming to the end of the year through June 30th.
Questions?
Yeah, I refresh my memory, Tammy, is this part of the, well, I know it's not part of it, but is this in addition to the $2 million that we transferred into the special ed account?
I can't remember exactly what we transferred. Was it $2 million or $1 million, Danette? I'm looking at her because it was at the beginning of the year. This will be additional funding, though, to answer your question, Bill.
So what's the total transfer into the special ed account for this year? Is what I'm wondering, because you know when we start moving this kind of money around, you know, it's I think our responsibility to start asking questions as to why, you know, such large amount of money are needed to be transferred into the budget, because obviously, you know, something's happening that, you know, wasn't planned for at the beginning of the year. So, yeah, and I know I thought it was 2 million, maybe not, but I thought with this added on to it, it's a substantial amount of money going into that program, and I think we need to start taking a look at it.
Okay, Bobby just found it. She said that we had transferred 1.7 earlier, so it would be just about 2.5 million total.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good number, pretty big number. You know, that you know, transfer into a program. You know, I think we need to take a look at what's going on in there.
To your point, Mr. Lenart.
As far as the 775, I mean, if these are invoices that are coming in that have already been, you know, the costs have already been incurred, then we don't have much choice but to pay it. But I guess I want to know why the program is growing at such a rate. What's
Yeah, I do have a lot of the information. If you had specific questions, a lot of it is in with staffing services. Some of it this year is us being short psychs and speech teachers. A lot of IEPs needing OT and PT services for our students that are coming to us. Some of our alt ed purchase professional services students that have special needs students that have been placed to different locations. Some are tuition bills from other school districts.
Didn't we do a lot of these things in-house before? It sounds like we pushed a lot of them out to contracts.
We did have a lot. We did have some services that were at the FLC that were brought back, and they don't have the services currently, some of the behavior services that we need at the FLC. So we've had to use some different, like Yellow Breeches and some other news story in Vista to support our students that have higher needs. To that point, though, we are putting, it is in the next year's budget to increase significantly the special ed budget to cover these contracts.
I'm not concerned, well, I am concerned about, having the budget, so we don't have to do these transfers, but, but it's still, my concern is the growth of the program. And if there's anything that we can do to, if it means bringing some of the functions back in-house, how can we, is there any way that we can run this program more efficiently?
We are definitely exploring those, and we started the year with 3 full-time psychs. We are now up to 6 of the 7, I believe. Is that correct, Tina? So we have 1 more that we need to employ. We were, I think we're nearly fully staffed with speech now as well, and we were quite short with speech teachers. So, we are looking at some of the shortfalls we have in staffing that were discussed earlier in tonight's evening. Definitely have hit learning support department hard.
If this is a $2.5 million increase from the start of the year, then if you, and that's on top of last year's budget, which I think we transferred an extra $2 million into the program. Correct me if I'm wrong, Tammy, but between last year's transfer of $2 million and this year's transfer of $2.5 million, we need to take a hard look at this, I think, program, see what.
Yeah, Bill, sorry, Bill. I do believe what we put into the current budget for this year was an additional $1 million to special ed. I did work with Danette and Kurt a little bit to try to unravel the budgets for the last few years for the pupil personnel services. We did have a year where a prior administrator had recommended bringing services back into the district. We added several classrooms, quite a few staff. That cost is about $1.8 million. When that was presented, it was presented that it was going to save the district money and that we would not be putting kids out into placements. I think that happened for a portion of it for a year, maybe the 1 year, but we are putting a lot more kids out, and Kurt could probably talk to that better than I can. So we have services now in-house, but they can't service all the children, so there are students who are still getting outplaced to placements that we are, in some cases, driving kids to Newville, Carlisle, Harrisburg area, so that comes at a cost. But that was the best that I could do as far as digging back to try to find how did we get kind of upside down with this budget. But the costs are going up, as you can tell, just by looking at the cyber charter cost that we're paying to them. That's all driven by what we put into our budget for special ed.
Yeah, well, the million that was at the beginning of this budget year, right? You build an extra $1 million in this year's budget.
In the current year budget, yeah, the 22-23.
Right. And then last year's budget, though, I thought we did a $2 million transfer.
We did a transfer, but I cannot recall if it was $2 million. We'd have to go back and look at that, Bill, but we can get that for you.
Well, but my point is, if you build, this year's, build up with last year's build up, that's a lot of money.
I'm wondering if, at some point, should Finance Committee review, since this is such a large thing, almost have a quarterly review of the special ed budget or something, how things are going to?
We can, yes, we can do that.
I just throw it out there for, realistically, the next board. because Mr. Leonard's and I won't be here, but it might be something that the Finance Committee, future Finance Committee would want to consider. Because at least you'd be able to, we're at halfway through the year, you'd be able to say, oh, yeah, we're kind of, I'm sure you're tracking this already. But.
Well, there are occasions, and where tuition from other districts comes in very late. In fact, some of it doesn't even come in by the end of the fiscal. It'll come in sometimes in August, October for the prior year. So those things are a little hard for us to predict. And they're still placing students. But it's just copied on one today where we have another child that we need to drive to Hagerstown. So those are unknowns that are very hard, I think, to get a full grip on. But certainly, yeah, we could do something with that.
And I think the other challenge that we have, because as you were talking, what popped into my mind is we sign these contracts with people, and then they turn around, they don't bill us until October. Could we put something in the contract that says about the billing timeliness or whatever?
Well,
I mean, in theory, but then you go,
that's actually another
we're
school
fighting
district.
for spots, so it's not like we have a whole lot of.
Yeah, these are usually kids who are in other districts, and it's through the child
this is
accounting
coming
process.
from other
Yeah.
districts, not the contracts that we have, like with River Rock, and it may be a student that's placed for not by us. A lot of these are placements that are not by our district, that the students may be at a hospital or might have been a probation placement that another IU or another school district's providing the services for these students, and then we get those bills pretty late within the year.
All right, so Mr. Leonard's, anything, do we want this as a separate
Oh,
item?
just one other note. The sad part about this thing too is, our costs, our expenses in this program are skyrocketing, and yet, and correct me again if I'm wrong, Tammy, but our funding from the state for special ed program stays flat. It's
That's
little or no growth and funds coming from the state to support this, our special ed program.
Yeah, that's accurate, Bill. We did get a bump up in this current fiscal year like we did with the basic ed, but over the years in the past, it's been relatively flat.
All right, so I'd say we put it on consent agenda because, as we've discussed here, these are items that have already been incurred, and we have to, and have already been paid, essentially. Just need to tidy up the books to match. All right, 208, flexible instruction days.
So these are what we refer to as the FID days. We want to continue to apply for them. Our goal was not to use them. We didn't really use any. We didn't use any this year officially for our school district, but if we would have some kind of event, let's say a catastrophic event, even at one school where the power of the system went down, we could use a FID day so we can still count those days. Our neighboring school districts, some of them use them for their snow days if they don't have snow days built in, but we want to take advantage that we would have the option if we need to use the flexible instruction days to have that option. Our goal is to have the kids in school every day and not to use these, but it's kind of an insurance policy that the state's allowing us to apply for, and this is our narrative for that.
Okay, any questions? Okay, consent agenda. 209, Meraki contract.
This is a renewal contract for Meraki. It's a private school that we use for educational services for students with special needs. They specialize in special ed and some of our autistic population that we need a more restrictive environment.
Okay, consent agenda. 210, LIU Science Professional Development Contract.
Yes, this is, we have some money for summer professional development, and there's new science standards this year that the state has rolled out. The LIU is going to be, we're contracting with them for a day to work through those new science standards with our science teachers, K through 12. So we're opening up that as one of our flex days. and it's coming out of the curriculum instruction budget.
Okay, 211 then, or that'd be a consent agenda. 211 is information item about the biology course.
Yes, this is information only. This is, tomorrow would start the 30-day review that we would have in the lobby actually here at Cash's, but the science department for IB-DP biology class is requesting 10 books and 10 chemistry course for biology and chemistry, the course companion books that are $55 each, totaling $1,210.
Just a question, what is the status of the IB program as far as enrollment?
I know Brad sent the information to Dr. Long.
Right now we have, in comparison last year, we had 11 diploma students in the 11th grade, and then 4 diploma students in the, or no, 3, I'm sorry, so we made it 14. This next year, they're looking at 21 diploma students.
In 11th grade?
No, total. It would be 11 and 10, so 21. And then with the number of courses that have been selected, last year it was right around 180 to 190. And then this year, it's 336.
What was the number of, and maybe this isn't the appropriate time to even ask, but there was a number that we were given that we were going to reach a certain number in that IB program for the diploma students in order to maintain that program.
We were trying to get to between 20 and 25.
That's what I thought, that it was significantly more than what we have reached.
Yeah, we have 21 right now for next year.
What did we give on the time? Was it two years, two school years, or was that?
I was looking for my email, but I couldn't find it.
The last time we brought it in, it was determined that we would just check in each year to make sure, you know, that the numbers were growing. I don't remember of any cutoff.
It wasn't. I thought we had said. I thought there was 2 years. Yeah, 2 years.
I can look back in the agenda.
We could go back to YouTube and watch the videos.
Yes. Yeah. See, I knew that'd come in handy.
I'm the same with you, Dr. Long. I remember there was a lot of discussion on this, and because I was advocating that we should have a very clear number.
Yeah.
But I kind of thought we landed that we didn't have a specific number, other than we just wanted to ensure that there is progress. But my recollection could very well be off also. Yeah. But we'll check. Or you'll check. Thanks. Other questions on the 211? Okay, 212, second graduation date.
Yes, 212, we would like to run a second graduation, August 14th at 6:30 p.m. for those students who did not make the first graduation, and that would be through summer school.
That'll go to consent agenda then, but I'll do a plug for it. I think I made it last year, and it was a really cool event. Because these are the kids that you know, I applauded them, because you have the regular graduation, and it's like that's a celebration moment in itself, but you have these other small number, I think they're like 10 typically, or 20 maybe, that almost got to the finish line. They didn't, and they could have said, yep, forget it. But they finished. They took it over the finish line, and they got it done and still graduated. So it's a, I would say, put it on your calendar, because it's a very touching ceremony. 213.
213 is the ATSI plan. ATSI is Additional Targeted Support and Improvement Plan. Cassius has been put on the ATSI level once again. Last year, or the last 3 years, they were on it for special ed achievement, growth, and attendance, and EL graduation rate. And then the state has added economically disadvantaged students achievement in math and ELA, growth in math and ELA, and then English language proficiency and graduation rate for the 2 or more races. So they have some more items that we need to look at. What they did was they looked at essential practices. They considered 3 of them for what their improvement plan we're looking at. Practice number 4 is identifying the student learning needs. They're really going to focus on that to make sure that student learning goes up. And number 11 then is student feeling welcome and belonging within the school due to their survey. And then 13, looking at what student needs are presented in their school here. With that, they had quite a nice committee of teachers, administrators. The IU was there with them and assisted them in the progress of the goals and things. This needs to be submitted the first part of June.
It doesn't need to be tonight, but I would love at some point to hear what do we need to do to move off of this, and how could the board better support that?
Well, they highlighted 4 areas in their plan. One is right now the state has eliminated the financial portion of assistance. So what we're doing is trying to look at and through our budget to help out with that in some way. But the IU support has also diminished in this time period as well. So they used to get quite a few, and I think it was 30. I think they're down to 10 now. And with the plan, that plan has probably eaten up 2/3 of that time of the 10. They look at subs for training, also finances to do some items, and we're looking for that. And then really what they've been looking at and examining other schools that have been on ATSI. They need intervention coaches to help out teachers with interventions and assisting kids.
Other questions? Okay, 214.
214 is a dual enrollment agreement with Penn State University. We would like to enter into this agreement that goes along with the dual enrollment grant that we received for $75,000. We need at least one board-approved agreement, and Penn State is first. We will have others coming, but Penn State wanted to reach out to us and have this done first.
Okay, great. 215. Mrs. Clever, over to you. Or Dr.
Sure,
Long.
I can talk
Yeah.
about it. Policy 707 is the use of school facilities. This policy hasn't been updated, and especially the attachment with the fees and things like that. What we did was we looked at quite a few different school districts' policies on this. We looked at PSBA's new policy. It just didn't suit our needs. So we really enjoyed reading the, and I'm serious, we really enjoyed reading the Cumberland Valley School District policy on 707. I called the superintendent there, asked him permission to use that policy. We discussed it for probably about 10 or 15 minutes about how their facilities were being used, and they were being used exactly like ours are right now. And we needed to make some adjustments. There were too many organizations that were getting it for free, and we felt that, organizations that want to use our facilities, that's fine, they can, but they also need to help take care of it, and it's not the district's responsibility to fix the fields and things like that. So with that, we came up with this policy, but also the AR that goes along with it. Buildings and Grounds made that AR, and then we're also looking in one for sheds. We have sheds from some of the organizations throughout our district, and we need an administrative regulation on sheds and if they're appropriate or not.
appropriate, how to maintain maintenance expectations and
That's
all of
correct.
that
That's correct.
stuff. We talked to policy committee quite a bit about this one. And really there's a lot of discussion on the need for it. And part of the discussion also was, we understand community organizations would say, well, these are public facilities. It's the district, I pay taxes and all of that. But it also means that we have a responsibility to make sure that they are properly protected and maintained and so forth. And because as a taxpayer that doesn't have a kid that would be playing in one of these organizations, I don't want to subsidize their activities because they destroy the field, leave equipment, other things. And even one of the things that we had that was, we're incurring custodial fees, expenses, because sometimes these events are happening at a time where we don't have the custodians scheduled, so we got to pay them to come in, just because of a non-district activity. And I don't think that's something that's appropriate. So that's why we had a really good look at this policy, and this one has some time sensitivity to it because we know we want to time it right from the perspective of we know that there's change in sports, to make sure that the policy's in effect before, just kind of like how do you find the sweet spot of on the calendar. So we're going to get this one for first review next week or 2 weeks, and then in the first meeting in June will be the final second one. So please review this, and if there's any questions, let us know because of the timing related to it.
Could we, one question I had.
Dr. Shore, you bring up a good point. I think even in our current setup, there's something in there that says we can't even charge for custodian fees. Is that correct, or something? There's some adverse loophole in there that we can't even charge for the custodian fees, isn't there?
Yeah, we'll just say there was inconsistencies between buildings and scheduling challenges, and we came across, I didn't, the group that dove into this even saw situations where some outside activity or group caused us, the district, to not be able to use the facilities because they reserved it first. It's like, no, this is district stuff. We get first dibs. So there's just, I don't know the specific answer to that, Ed, but we'll say the committee, the ad hoc committee that pulled this together went in pretty good detail.
One question I had in reviewing the chart is that there are several different categories. It might help somewhere, I'm sure it's listed what those different categories mean, but I wonder if we could put that on the sheet where the chart is as well.
The categories are in the policy itself.
Can we also add it to the sheet? I mean, if not, if there's a reason that doesn't make sense, that's okay.
You mean add it to the AR?
Yeah, I mean, I just see there's some blank space there.
Space
and
at the bottom of page
I would
2.
imagine that's not a hard thing to do a bullet point summary of each category. That way, whoever's using it, they don't have to refer back to the policy every time.
Okay, you guys will give it a try? Or even if it's like you said, Mr. Avery, even if it's a bullet of that, but then a referral to the policy for more details or something. Also on the AR, we did put a time range on this. So the expectation is that then January 1st of 2024, there would be an updated rental schedule. And that might mean that there's no change, but they wanted to keep it, the facilities and the team looked at it and said, when's the best time to do it? To make it calendar year or to keep it related to the school year? And they landed on calendar year. To me, I'm like, that's completely in you guys' lane to deal with. All right, so
Any other questions on this? All right, so, Ms. Stauffer, let's have this as a separate item next time. Just because I'd like to make sure that we have opportunity to hit home some points during public comments or public session. Like the one, and I don't remember, Dr. Long, but you guys had said there was like, I mean, use of the fields, you know, we incur the custodian expense, but there's also some damage that we incurred. It was like $20,000. It's just, so there's some points that I want to be made in the public section when people are still here. So we'll make it a separate item then. All right, 216. Contracted bus drivers. So just an updated list of school bus aides and sub-drivers, et cetera?
Yes.
Mrs. Stein?
That's correct.
Okay. Yeah. All right, typical stuff. 217 and 218 to appoint Ms. Stein and Ms. Nolt for the Assistant Board Secretary again for a year and Treasurer for a year. Okay. I know you're both hoping that someone would veto or, but, all right. And 219, appoint Dr. Redding as the authorized representative per public law. Okay, that'll go consent agenda. All right, anything else?
I know you got tickets tonight.
Oh, we got tickets tonight? Yeah, go ahead.
For Mr. Lenartz and Mr. Norcross, tonight, Dr. Long placed tickets at everybody's location. If you do not need all your tickets, if you want to get them to Crystal Elgis, or you have Dr. Diller pointing to herself down there, but she has a grandchild graduating this year. You can get those to Crystal Elgis, so we do have some special requests that do come in, and it would be nice if you, we can use the tickets if you don't need them, so.
Thanks, Kurt.
All right, executive session then? And we can't do it in here because it's just not practical. Or could we? I think.